Please, Mom, just sign here." Her daughter's voice was syrup-sweet, the same voice that once begged for candy, but the pen felt like a guillotine in my trembling hand. Around us, life went on. Coins clinked, phones buzzed, and fluorescent light hummed like a merciless metronome counting down the last of my savings. The pen was heavier than it looked. It sat on the white paper like an accusation. I had never thought a small, ordinary pen could decide the shape of the rest of a life. But that day in the bank, it felt enormous. My hand, which had once braided my daughter's hair and held my husband's as he took his last breath, quivered under Vanessa's gentle command. Her finger rested near mine, possessive, intimate, as if she could steady me simply by leaning into me. Across from us, Sebastian, charming, clean-cut, the sort of man who smiled in ways that always cost other people something, held my arm with a grip that bruised. "Please, Mom, just sign here." Vanessa's voice was a practiced sweetness, soft as cotton but hard as bone. It had been years, decades, since I had allowed someone to take my independence. When Peter had been alive, we shared everything. The small victories, the hospital bills, the stubborn resentments that can live like winter under a marriage's rug. He used to say, "We work, we save, and we eat one good meal together a week." He laughed about it. I laughed with him. After he died 3 years ago, something else died too. A sense of shared stewardship. Grief is slippery that way. It can make you less cautious, more gullible, hungry for company. I looked down at the documents. My name printed in block letters. My pension accounts itemized. Lines that meant the difference between medicines and mortgage. Between quiet dinners and cold instant soup. The transfer amount stared back at me, larger than any number I had thought would ever be mine to spend. 40, 50,000. Numbers I had watched pile up over 46 years of small economies. Extra shifts, birthday cakes bought on marked down days, vacations never taken. That money was not simply currency. It was a life, stored in a white envelope labeled, "When we're old." I remembered Peter's face when we had opened the retirement account. A face that creased into grin lines when he told me, "We did all right, Liv. We'll be fine." Those words echoed in the humming bank like a reel of film playing backwards. Everything felt unreal, like being underwater in a shallow pool and remembering suddenly how to breathe. Vanessa's hand pressed mine down, as if to steady me and to decrease the space between us. "It's just paperwork, Ma, for taxes. For..." She fumbled for a word and landed on paperwork. Sebastian's fingers were an iron band around my wrist. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he whispered. The smell of him, cigarettes, stale coffee, cologne that wasn't cheap but pretended to be, filled my nostrils. His whisper sat on my cheek like a viper, quiet and cruel. There were people in the bank. Always people. A young man in a suit next to us checked his phone and did not look up. An older woman in line flipped through an insurance brochure. The woman in front of us, a mother with a toddler on her hip, laughed at something on her phone. The teller slid currency under glass. Banks are curated spaces of normalcy. People come and go, lives intersect briefly like weather. No one would notice a theft masquerading as assistance, because all theft that wants to be polite hides in plain daylight. I had a moment of clarity so intense it felt like an electric shock. I had brought with me a small folded scrap of paper and a pen in case of forms. Without thinking, I scribbled 2 words, "Help," folded the note small, and slid it across the table toward the bank manager as though I were moving contraband. My heart was an animal beating in my throat. Vanessa smiled at a line of print. Sebastian leaned over to explain something. Their eyes were nowhere near the little scrap of paper. I folded the note and pushed it so small it might be mistaken for lint. Mr. Thompson, the bank manager, had been introduced when we'd sat down. A balding man in a blazer, a courteous smile, the kind of man who made small talk about weather as if that alone could lubricate human crisis. When he came to our table, I clutched the scrap and slid it toward him with a trembling thumb. Everything held its breath for a second. He read the note. His polite face softened into controlled alarm. The button under his desk clicked into silent motion. An unseen mechanism began to function. I felt relief surge like cold water into a parched throat. The silent alarm, the institutional promise that there are systems to protect people like me. For a moment, I felt safe. Of course, there is always a before. Before that day in the bank, my life had been a string of yeses. Yes to the pink bicycle at 5. Yes to summer camp at 15, even though we had to sell my grandmother's jewelry. Yes to university tuition when other parents said no. Yes to the wedding photo that cost more than a month's groceries. Yes when my daughter asked for the down payment that replaced the house's roof with a promise. The ledger in my head kept track of every yes in the currency of loyalty. When Vanessa had cried and said, "I'll pay you back," I had believed her the way you believe a child who promises to clean their room tomorrow. With charity, with hope, and with a little blindness. I was honest with myself that afternoon. I had been a pillar for my family. I had taken odd jobs, double shifts at the hospital cafeteria, polished silverware, delivered flowers at dawn. My back ached. My feet had been swollen for years. I had used the money saved for later as the mortar that kept our household from collapsing under Vanessa's emergencies. A wedding, a honeymoon, a down payment, furniture, renovation. Each sounded reasonable when she asked. Caroline, upon whom she pressed the softest arguments, ballet lessons, piano, camp. Caroline's little face bent toward me with crayons and confessions. "I made you big because your love is big, Grandma." How could I refuse? The child's truth was a wedge into me that could never be pried back. Peter had been proud of me. He watched me in ways that made me invisible to vanity and visible to character. He used to tease Liv, "When you take care of people, you get a halo." He died cradled in my hands, his breath leaving before the clock could declare him absent. 3 years later, the hallways of our house still carried the echo of his shoes. His absence was both a silence and a pressure. People expect you to endure, and the world will keep asking you to give even as it takes. I had not planned to lose everything. My decision to sign the loan papers for Vanessa's house, to withdraw $40,000 from the retirement fund, felt at the time like rescue. The bank clerk at that withdrawal had frowned and said, "Are you sure, ma'am? There's a 10% penalty." I had said yes. Love can be irrational. Love can be a transaction dressed as devotion. I had paid the penalty for love with a smile. The years after the down payment were a strange ledger. Debts came in small increments. A fridge replaced, a car fixed, a job lost, an eviction avoided. The money I thought would be repaid became an annuity of need. Vanessa called at odd hours. "Mom, urgent." Sebastian texted, need cash. They developed an economy of crises with me as the reserve bank. On that Tuesday, seated under the humming lights, when Vanessa asked me to sign away my widow's pension, what was left of the nest that Peter and I had woven over 46 years, the sound of the bank's cash-counting machine hammered at my temples. I wrote the note to Mr. Thompson because I could no longer speak. My voice had been drowned in a chorus of pleas for help for years. It had been reduced to a whisper that only found paper and ink. Mr. Thompson's controlled response was a pivot. He excused himself, went to the teller's area, and keyed the alarm under his desk. His eyes met mine across the polished wood, and for the first time that afternoon I felt the ghost of courage steady me. He would call for police. He would call security. A person should be able to stand up in a public place and be safe. The bank was a civic space. The law was supposedly a neutral force. But people are not instruments of law. They are human, with attachments and preconceptions. Watching Mr. Thompson move, Vanessa adjusted her expression into concern and rehearsed affection. "She's fine, Mr. Thompson. We're just doing some paperwork," she told him, a practiced calm. Sebastian tightened his grip. "Don't make a scene," he mouthed at me. His eyes glinted with a kind of menace that did not need to raise its voice to be heard. I tried to breathe. A memory of Peter's hand slipping into mine in a movie theater carved through the panic like a helmsman through fog. I thought of my money as if it were a person. I thought of Caroline's drawing of me, huge and smiling. I thought of everything I had done to keep my family's dream floating. I had never expected the dream to become an instrument against me. Then something in the air tilted. A man at the far end of the bank, earlier I'd seen him in line flipping a coin, pushed his cart closer to the counter. He looked ordinary. Gray jacket, worn shoes, a head of hair thinning into an honest baldness that made him look smaller than he was. But when his eyes fell on me, there was a flicker of recognition. Something shifted between him and me, a current I could not name. He lifted his newspaper and then lowered it again. He did not approach it once. He remained a presence, like a weather change you can sense before the sky turns. Mr. Thompson, meanwhile, had nodded subtly to someone over his shoulder. The quiet commotion around the bank folded like a theater curtain. I felt the weight of small rituals, the teller's trained steps, the manager's practiced concern. The world around us tightened and then loosened, and I let myself believe we were saved. My granddaughter Caroline had been the wedge always used against me. I saw her face now in my mind, a little girl with earnest eyes, unaware of the ledger she had become. For years, Vanessa had used her like currents. The moment the man in the gray jacket spoke my name, the bank waiting room seemed to tilt. Vanessa's silver smile froze. Sebastian's grip on my arm slackened just a hair's breadth. For the first time that afternoon, I felt all eyes on us, on me, and it wasn't entirely fear. The manager, Mr. Thompson, sighed quietly and nodded toward the teller. Two of them exchanged a glance. Beneath the polished surfaces of marble counters and corporate poster boards, some of them recognized the frailty of what might happen if no one intervened. The teller closed the safety glass, locked the drawer doors, and moved toward us with a hesitant step, as though entering another woman's private moment. "Is this real?" the man asked Vanessa, voice calm but firm. "Do you mean that Olivia Anderson?" Vanessa cleared her throat. Her composure, which had been so practiced it seemed carved, quivered for the first time. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't know. What do you mean by that, Olivia Anderson?" The man shifted, pulled a tissue from his jacket pocket, dabbed his forehead. I saw the past folding out of his posture, the way his shoulders sagged just slightly with recognition. "We used to work together," he said. "Liv Anderson. I called her a friend. She taught compassion in that old hospital wing when the light bulbs flickered and the interns were scared." My heart pounded. I recognized that hospital wing, the late-night wing, the one where Peter used to visit me after I finished my shift. I remembered the yellow cardigan I wore, patched at the elbows, thrift store soft, how I had poured coffee for tired souls, listened to their confessions, soothed them when they could not sleep, all while trying to keep my life together. Vanessa's forehead creased. Sebastian's jaw clenched. "Mom," Vanessa said, voice thick with something I could name only later, shame or surprise. "Please, you're embarrassing me." I opened my mouth to speak but couldn't immediately find the words. Betrayal and relief warred in my chest. The man in the gray jacket stood there, exposed by courage or accident. I did not know which. I felt exposed too. All the years of hidden hurt, the way I had laughed off my exhaustion, concealed my mounting debts. They were suddenly visible. The silent alarm throbbed in my awareness. I heard a faint rustling from behind the counters, a small commotion. 2 bank guards emerged from a back door. The security cameras spun overhead like mute witnesses. People in line turned. I saw phones out filming. The toddler mother stopped laughing. The man in the suit checked his watch. My stolen dignity, however quietly, was becoming history. Public. Sebastian put his arm around Vanessa, as though shielding her, as though trying to hold together a story that was falling apart. He looked at me with an intensity I had never liked. He measured me now for strength, for shame, for something he could use. "They're causing a scene, Mom," Vanessa hissed. "The manager—" I shook my head, surprisingly fierce. "No," I said, voice small but not trembling. "They are helping." But I listened too to Vanessa's words, to Sebastian's silence. I saw the fear and anger surfacing in them. Anger because this stranger threatened their narrative. Fear because people were watching. Fear because once a truth begins to be spoken, it cannot be unheard. The man in gray cleared his throat. "I just wanted to know you were okay. I didn't expect—" He gestured around, toward the papers, to the tension. "If you're not, I can help." Something in me cracked open. The years of yeses, the sacrifice, the unspoken resentment, all crowded forward. I looked Vanessa in the eye. "Why are we here, Vanessa?" I said. "Why is Sebastian holding my arm like I can't think for myself?" Vanessa's face shifted. Rage hardened into lines around her mouth. Before she could speak, Sebastian interceded. "Mom," he said sharply, "you don't need this. You don't need to embarrass us all." He looked at the bank staff. "She's having an episode." I hated how small those words made me. An episode. Emotional, delusional, weak. All the labels I had swallowed my whole life so no one else could treat me less than I was. The teller approached and placed a hand on the counter. "Ma'am," she said softly, "if you like, we can call someone a relative, an advisor, or even the police." If you want to make sure everything here is legal and proper. I looked at the teller. Her eyes were concerned. The bank guard was watching. The man in gray stood quietly. Sebastian's lips tightened. I realized then that I did want someone else involved. I wanted someone to see me, not as the frail old mother, but as someone with rights, someone with history and integrity. Yes, I said. I want someone I can trust. Vanessa's face twisted. Fine, she spat. Call whoever you want. I don't care, but I'm not wasting more time. Then the silence stretched out. The bank manager stepped forward, clearing his throat. Mrs. Anderson, if you agree, we will secure your documents here, and I will hold all transactions until you have legal counsel. You are not obliged to sign this transfer today. His voice was steely, gentle. I felt as though I had been granted back something I'd lost, the power to decide. Sebastian's jaw dropped. Vanessa opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it. Their defenses flickered. The man in gray glanced at me. I saw compassion, not pity. I hope you know you're not alone, he said. You once helped so many. There are people who remember. I wanted to lean forward, to press his hand, to hold on to that belonging. But Vanessa rose abruptly from her chair. I'm leaving, she declared loud enough for others to hear. She snatched the documents off the desk. Sebastian followed. For a moment, the world went chaotic. Gasps, murmurs. Vanessa's voice cracked. You're making a big mistake, Mom. You'll regret this. Sebastian steered her toward the bank exit. Their footsteps echoed in the high-ceiling bank hall. Vanessa paused before she passed the man in gray. Their eyes locked. I thought I saw guilt, or maybe anger, possibly regret, something like grief. But her face was carefully composed when she turned away. The doors shut behind them with a clack that sounded like a final judgment. The bank fell quiet for a moment. Then the murmur of curiosity resumed. Phones lowered. The yellow cardigan woman, the one with memory, felt slightly less invisible. I sank into one of the chairs. My body shook, not entirely from fear, though fear was in there. Also relief, shame. The collision of knowing I had given too much, but also that this might be the turning point. Mr. Thompson came to me. His eyes were soft. He placed a folder in front of me. Mrs. Anderson, he said, these are copies of everything you were asked to sign, and the bank copies. I've blocked any further withdrawals until we hear from you. He slid a card across the table. Here, he said, I have the number of an elder law attorney, someone who specializes in financial abuse of seniors, someone I trust. I took the card with a trembling hand. It felt like a lifeline. Somewhere behind the walls of my mouth, words I'd never said began forming. I deserve dignity. I deserve respect. I will not be invisible. They were small words, but they felt weighty. I thanked Mr. Thompson softly. He nodded and stepped back. The teller brought me a glass of water. I sipped it, tasting cold and real. Outside, sunlight slanted through the windows. Too bright, too vivid, as though the world had been grayed down, and now someone had turned the color back on. When I stepped onto the curb outside the bank, Vanessa and Sebastian's car being gone felt like both a relief and a wound. I stood there, holding the folder and the attorney card, deep breath after deep breath. Cars passed, people walked by. None of them knew me. Many of them just saw a woman in a yellow cardigan with grief in her eyes, but in my heart I felt something shift. The weight of invisible debts, not just financial but of love, of sacrifice, of silence, had begun to lift. That evening, I sat at home in the dim light of the living room. The house, once filled with light and memories of Peter, felt cavernous. Caroline's drawing still hung on the fridge. Her piano bench pushed back as though someone had just left. I held the folder of documents in my lap and the attorney's card in my bleeding hands. For years I had felt like I was lying awake in my life, heart ticking in the darkness, waiting for someone to rescue me. Tonight I felt for the first time like I might rescue myself. I didn't sleep well. In every crack of midnight silence, I heard Vanessa's voice, Sebastian's pressure, the squeak of the pen, the turning page of legal documents. I saw Caroline's face, hopeful, trusting, unaware of what she too might lose in this. And I saw that the world could still recognize the woman I had been when I wore that yellow cardigan. Even if I had forgotten, in dawn's pale light I resolved something. I would reach out to someone old, Clara, my sister. I would get legal counsel, and I would gather evidence. All the papers, the trashed receipts, the bank statements, the texts asking for money. I would ask questions, demand answers. I would show Vanessa and Sebastian that love does not give you the right to take everything. The broken promises had begun to unravel, not at their will, but mine. The next morning I woke to an unfamiliar sound, silence. Usually Vanessa's texts arrived by sunrise. Reminders, demands, instructions cloaked as care. Don't forget your prescription, Mom. We'll come by later to discuss the insurance policy. Sebastian thinks you should refinance the house before rates climb. But today, nothing. No buzzing phone. No exclamation-pointed urgency. At first, I felt relief, like a door had been quietly closed between us. But relief is a tricky thing. It leaves behind a hollow space. And in that space, the questions echo louder. What was Vanessa planning? Vanessa across town, in their sunlit kitchen, Vanessa stirred coffee that had already gone cold. She hadn't spoken to Sebastian since the bank. They had driven home in brittle silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, her gaze fixed on the street lamp streaking past. Now, in daylight, the weight of what had happened pressed down harder. The humiliation, the stranger's eyes, her mother's sudden sharp defiance. Do you understand what you've done? Sebastian finally snapped, breaking the silence. Vanessa flinched. Me? She refused to sign because of that man. She refused because you pushed too hard. You always push too hard. The words stung. Vanessa wanted to argue, but Sebastian's glare cut her down. He slammed his mug into the sink, splintering the ceramic. You promised me access, he said. You promised it was handled. And now the bank's flagged her accounts. Do you realize what that means? Vanessa's throat tightened. She had promised. She always promised. Ever since she was a teenager, she had learned the only way to hold on to love was to give more than she had, to sacrifice, to smooth over every rough edge. She remembered her mother years ago telling her no, refusing to buy her a prom dress because the bills were stacked too high. Vanessa had sworn that night she'd never be powerless like her mother. She would have choices. She would never look weak. But weakness had followed her, hidden under the polish of her nails, the labels on her handbags. Debt crept behind her every smile, and Sebastian knew it. Now, with the bank standing in the way, Her carefully arranged world was beginning to fray. Olivia, I spent the afternoon in my study, the room Peter once filled with his books and careful notes. Dust clung to the shelves, but his presence still lingered in the margins of the pages. I began to gather things. Bank statements, receipts tucked in old purses, emails Vanessa had sent me with urgent subject lines. Every piece felt like stitching in a larger fabric I had been too blind to see. As I worked, I felt steadier. Anger had begun to replace fear. Around dusk, the phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Anderson?" A voice, warm, deliberate. "This is Daniel Hayes. We met yesterday at the bank. The man in gray." "Oh," I said, surprised. "Yes, I hope I'm not intruding. After yesterday, I couldn't walk away without making sure you were all right." Something in his tone, not pity but recognition, loosened the knot in my chest. "I'm managing," I said. "I know how hard that is," Daniel said quietly. "My mother went through something similar. It nearly destroyed her before anyone noticed." I held the phone tighter. What happened? She trusted the wrong people. Family. By the time the truth surfaced, most of her savings were gone. But she fought back. I helped her, and she won. His words carried a promise, one I wasn't ready to believe but desperately wanted to. "Mrs. Anderson," he continued, "if you want, I can connect you with people who specialize in this, people who won't let it slide." I closed my eyes. For years I had carried everything alone. Vanessa's anger, Caroline's hope, Peter's absence. Now, for the first time, someone was offering to carry a piece with me. "Call me Olivia," I said softly. There was a pause. Then Daniel's voice brightened just slightly. "All right, Olivia. Then let's make sure you're not silenced anymore." Outside, night fell heavy. Inside, in different houses, 3 lives knotted tighter. Vanessa, trapped in the reflection of her own choices, desperate to maintain control. Sebastian calculating his next move, and me, Olivia, holding documents and a stranger's number, standing at the edge of a war I never thought I'd fight. But this time I would not be alone. Morning sunlight broke through the curtains, but it felt harsh, not warm. I hadn't slept. All night, I kept hearing Vanessa's voice in the bank, sweetened but sharp as glass. "Mom, trust me. It's for your own good." But now I knew better. I brewed coffee, though I barely tasted it, and spread papers across the table. My savings account statements, the retirement withdrawals, every check I had written to Vanessa and Sebastian. For years I had handed money over as if love required a receipt. Now, for the first time, I saw the total. More than $200,000 a lifetime. Gone. But something had shifted. Instead of shame, I felt fire. Vanessa crossed town. Vanessa sat in her car, parked outside a boutique she couldn't afford to enter anymore. On her phone, a list of unpaid bills glared back at her. Credit cards maxed, mortgage behind, Sebastian's business loan already in default. She bit her lip until it bled. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She had done everything right. Married well, dressed well, played the part of the successful wife. People envied her. People admired her. That meant something, didn't it? But envy didn't pay the bills. She thought about calling her mother. Not to apologize, never that, but to negotiate. Olivia was soft, always had been. If she just leaned harder, pushed the right emotional buttons, the money would come. It always had. Still, a chill crawled under her skin. At the bank, something had changed in her mother's eyes. Something hard, something Vanessa hadn't seen before. And then there was the man. The stranger in gray. The one who had looked at her mother like he already knew the truth. Vanessa clenched the steering wheel. Whoever he was a problem. Olivia, that afternoon, Daniel called again. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said. "A friend? She's an attorney who specializes in elder financial abuse. Don't worry, she's discreet." The words elder financial abuse cut through me. I hated how they sounded. Like I was helpless, a victim. But wasn't I? Will this hurt Vanessa?" I asked quietly. There was a pause. "Olivia, protecting yourself isn't the same as hurting someone else. If your daughter is making choices that endanger you, then the consequences are hers to bear, not yours." My throat tightened. I wasn't ready to admit it out loud, but Daniel's words struck deep. We agreed to meet that evening in a small cafe. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and fresh pastries. At a corner table, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a soft smile stood to greet me. "Mrs. Anderson, I'm Rachel Levin." She shook my hand firmly. Daniel filled me in. "I'd like to help." I slid the folder of papers across the table. She flipped through them quickly but carefully, her brows furrowing as she turned each page. "This is worse than I thought," she murmured. "Repeated withdrawals, loans never repaid, and the coercion at the bank. If the teller or manager saw anything, that's evidence." My chest tightened. "What happens now?" Rachel leaned forward. "First, we secure your assets. We put alerts on your accounts, notify the bank formally that you may be under duress. Then we document every incident, every call, every check, every demand. And Vanessa?" Rachel's expression softened. "That depends on how far she's willing to go. But Olivia, you need to understand. People who cross this line rarely stop on their own." Her words echoed in me long after I left the cafe. Vanessa and Sebastian that same evening. Sebastian returned home late, smelling of whiskey and stale smoke. Vanessa waited in the kitchen, bills spread across the table like landmines. "We need more money," she said flatly. He snorted. "Brilliant observation." "I'm serious, Sebastian. Mom's pulling back. I can feel it. She's hiding something." He narrowed his eyes. "Then push harder. Remind her what she owes you." "She'll cave. She always does." But Vanessa hesitated. For the first time, she wasn't so sure. Her mother's silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strategy. And strategy was dangerous. Olivia. That night, as I locked the front door, my phone buzzed with a new message. "Unknown number, Mrs. Anderson. This is Rachel. I want you to know, you're not alone anymore. We'll protect what's yours." I stared at the words, my pulse racing. For the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost the day Peter died. Hope. By the time the clock struck midnight, 3 truths had emerged. Vanessa was running out of lies. Sebastian was running out of patience. And I, Olivia, was running out of time to choose between silence and survival. But this time, I would not choose silence. The next morning, I woke with resolve in my chest. For the first time in decades, I wasn't going to explain myself, or bend, or soothe away other people's storms. I was going to say no. Olivia when Vanessa called, right on cue, voice dripping urgency. I was ready. "Mom," she began without a greeting. "The bank's dragging their feet and it's causing issues with our mortgage. We need you to go in today and—" "No," silence. "What?" I took a breath, steady but firm. "I said no, Vanessa. I will not go to the bank. I will not transfer a single dollar more." Her voice cracked like glass. "Mom, you don't understand. This is serious." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "I've given enough. More than enough. If you and Sebastian are in trouble, you'll have to find another way." The silence on the other end grew heavier, sharper. Then came the voice I dreaded most, the one that wasn't sweet or persuasive, but cruel. "You're unbelievable," Vanessa hissed. "After everything I've done for you, you'd throw us to the wolves? You'd let your own granddaughter suffer? Caroline." She used Caroline like a blade. My chest tightened, but I stayed steady. "Caroline is not suffering," I said softly. "She's a child, and she doesn't deserve to be used this way." The line went dead. Vanessa stared at her phone, fury prickling hot across her skin. Never, not once in her 35 years, had her mother spoken to her like that. Sebastian noticed immediately. "What happened?" he demanded. "She refused," Vanessa spat. "She actually said no." To me, Sebastian leaned back, his expression hardening. "Then we make her say yes." "How?" He smirked, cold and sure. "Pressure, fear, whatever it takes." For the first time, a shiver of doubt crept through Vanessa's anger. She had always depended on Sebastian's confidence, his certainty. But now that certainty looked like cruelty. Still, she stayed silent. Because if Sebastian left, she had nothing. Olivia that evening, I met Rachel again. We sat in her office, shelves lined with case files, framed diplomas, a plant drooping in the corner. "She's furious," I admitted, hands trembling in my lap. "I've never heard her sound like that." Rachel leaned forward. "Good. That means your boundary worked. But Olivia, you need to prepare yourself. When people like Vanessa lose control, they escalate." Her words settled in my stomach like ice. "Escalate how?" Rachel's eyes didn't waver. "They may show up. They may threaten. They may try to isolate you, even turn others against you, which is why we take precautions now. Do you have locks? A trusted neighbor? Someone you can call?" I thought of Daniel, the way his voice steadied mine, the way his eyes had carried recognition. "Yes," I said slowly. "I think I do." The visit 2 nights later, it happened. A knock at my door, sharp, insistent. I peeked through the curtain. Vanessa and Sebastian, looming behind her. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to let them in, to smooth things over, but Rachel's voice echoed in my head. "Boundaries hold only if you enforce them." I cracked the door but didn't unlatch it. "Mom," Vanessa said, her smile brittle. "Why are you making this so difficult? We just want to talk." "From there is fine," I replied. Her smile vanished. "This is ridiculous. You're my mother." Sebastian stepped forward, his eyes cold. "Open the door, Olivia, or we'll make sure Caroline knows how selfish her grandmother really is." The words struck like a blow, but instead of crumbling, I surprised myself. And them. "If you ever bring Caroline into this again," I said, my voice steady. "I will call the police." Sebastian's jaw clenched. Vanessa gasped. For the first time, they saw me not as the woman who always said yes, but as someone they could no longer control. And then, from across the street, a car door shut. Daniel. He stood on the curb watching. His presence was calm, but his eyes burned. Sebastian noticed too. He tugged Vanessa's arm. "We'll be back," he muttered. They left. Olivia, as their car pulled away, my knees nearly buckled. But Daniel crossed the street, steadying me with a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. Tears blurred my vision. "I don't feel strong, I feel terrified," he nodded. "That's what courage feels like at the start." And for the first time in years, I believed him. That night, alone in my house, I realized the battle had truly begun. Vanessa had lost her mask, Sebastian had shown his teeth, and I had finally found my voice. But voices alone don't win wars. The next move had to be mine. Olivia Rachel's office smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper. Clean, precise, no room for chaos. She slid a stack of forms across the desk toward me. "These will authorize protective measures," she explained. "Alerts on your accounts, restrictions on withdrawals without your presence, and a formal complaint noting potential coercion. Once filed, the bank is legally obligated to flag suspicious activity." My hand shook slightly as I signed. It felt like severing an invisible cord that had bound me to Vanessa for decades. Every stroke of ink said, "No more." Rachel watched me, her eyes steady. "This is the beginning, Olivia, but I need you to prepare. Once they realize the money is locked down, they'll react." I swallowed. React how? She didn't sugarcoat it. Threats, manipulation, maybe even intimidation. That's where Daniel comes in. I looked up, startled. "Daniel?" Rachel leaned back, folding her hands. "He's been through this before. Not just with his mother, with clients. He's not just a bystander, Olivia. He helps people stand their ground." Something flickered in her expression, respect mixed with caution. Sebastian, meanwhile, across town, Sebastian's temper boiled. He paced their living room like a caged animal, whiskey glass clutched tight in his hand. "She locked us out," he growled. "That old woman actually locked us out." Vanessa sat on the couch, silent. She hated him when he was like this, cruel, reckless, but she couldn't leave. She had no money of her own, no way to sustain the life she had built. Sebastian slammed the glass onto the table, shards scattering. "If she thinks she can just walk away from us, she's wrong. Dead wrong." Vanessa shivered. For the first time, she wondered if Sebastian's rage wasn't just about money. If maybe, deep down, he wanted to break her mother simply because he could. Olivia. That evening, Daniel met me at the cafe again. He sat across from me, his gray jacket neatly folded over the chair, his eyes softer than usual. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." For a moment he was silent. Then he exhaled slowly. "My father," he began. "He drained my mother's savings. Lied, manipulated, threatened her into giving up everything. I was 19 when I found out. By the time we intervened, she had nothing left. Nothing." His jaw tightened. I promised myself I'd never watch another family go through that in silence. I felt tears prick my eyes. "So when you saw me at the bank," "I saw her," he finished, "and I couldn't walk away." Something shifted between us then. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. The recognition of two people carrying scars shaped by betrayal. The threat later. That night, as I prepared for bed, the phone rang. "Unknown number." Against my better judgment, I answered. Olivia. Sebastian's voice, low, cold. My heart pounded. "You think you can run to lawyers? To strangers?" He chuckled darkly. "Those papers won't protect you. We will get what we're owed, one way or another." I tried to steady my breathing. "I don't owe you anything, Sebastian." "Oh, but you do," he sneered. "You raised a daughter who can't survive without you. You created this. Now you'll pay for it." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the receiver pressed to my ear long after the call ended. Then I remembered Rachel's words. "They may threaten. They may try to break you. That's when you stand taller." So I did. I locked every door, checked every window, and kept Daniel's number on the nightstand beside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't just preparing to endure. I was preparing to fight back. Olivia, it began with noises in the night, a creak on the porch, a shadow at the window, the faint rattle of a door handle. I lay in bed, frozen, every sense alive with dread. Then shattered silence, the sound of glass breaking. I reached for the phone with trembling hands, dialing Daniel before I even realized it. "Olivia?" His voice was sharp, awake. "There's someone outside. I think..." The crash of footsteps across the kitchen tiles confirmed it. "Stay on the line," Daniel ordered. "I'm coming." Sebastian inside. Sebastian's eyes scanned the darkened house. He moved with deliberate steps, not rushing, savoring the fear he imagined flooding Olivia's chest. "She thinks she can shut me out," he muttered. "We'll see." Behind him, Vanessa lingered on the porch, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She hadn't wanted to come, hadn't wanted it to go this far, but Sebastian had insisted. "This is too much," she whispered. "She's my mother." Sebastian shot her a look like steel. "She stopped being your mother when she turned her back on you." "Olivia." I pressed myself against the wall, clutching the phone, whispering into the receiver. "They're inside." "Daniel, he's inside." "Stay hidden," Daniel said. "Police are on their way. Don't move until I get there." My breath came shallow, ragged. I thought of Caroline, of Rachel's warnings, of every year I had folded myself small to keep peace. Not anymore. My eyes darted to the hallway closet. Inside, the old wooden bat my late husband had kept just in case. For the first time in decades, I understood what just in case meant. The confrontation, Sebastian turned a corner and froze. I was standing there, bat in hand. "This is your last chance," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "Leave my house, now." He smirked, amused. "Or what, you'll hit me? You don't have it in you, Olivia." But something in my eyes must have made him pause, because before he could take another step, headlights swept across the window. A car screeched to a stop. The front door rattled. Daniel, Vanessa. From the porch, Vanessa saw him arrive, tall, purposeful, fury etched into his features. For the first time, she felt a flicker of shame. Her mother wasn't the weak woman she had always imagined. And Sebastian wasn't the savior she had convinced herself he was. He was a predator. And she had let him feed Olivia. The chaos blurred after that. Police lights, officers pulling Sebastian from my home, Vanessa standing to the side, pale and silent. When it was over, Daniel stayed. He didn't speak much, just sat across from me as I clutched a blanket, my hands still trembling. Finally, he said quietly, "You're safe now." But Olivia, this isn't the end. He'll fight. And Vanessa, he hesitated. She may not stand with him forever. People like her eventually choose survival. I looked at the broken glass glittering across my kitchen floor. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice, and I was ready to claim it. Sebastian jail did not break him. It only sharpened him. By morning, he was out, smirking as he signed the release papers. No charges would stick. Not without clear evidence of forced entry, not without Olivia pressing harder. He left the precinct with Vanessa trailing behind him, pale and shaken. "You see?" he said smoothly, sliding an arm around her shoulders. "They can't touch me. Not unless she has proof. And she won't, because deep down, your mother's still the same weak woman she's always been." Vanessa didn't answer. For the first time, she wasn't sure if he was right. Olivia Rachel's office again, but this time I wasn't trembling. "He's out," I told her flatly. Rachel nodded. "Expected. But here's the thing, Olivia. The law doesn't move on fear. It moves on evidence. If you want this to stop, we need to document everything. Threats, calls, financial records, even witnesses." I thought of Vanessa. I thought of how her eyes had flickered on my porch, uncertain. "She'll never help me," I whispered. Rachel tilted her head. "Don't be so sure. When predators fall, they often drag their partners down with them. Vanessa's survival instinct may eventually win out." Her words lit something inside me. Not hope, not yet, but strategy. That night, Daniel spread a folder across my kitchen table. Bank statements, timelines, notes scribbled in his firm, steady handwriting. I started pulling what I could, he said. "There's a pattern. Withdrawals, transfers, sudden debts. If we connect this to Vanessa and Sebastian, we can build a case for coercion." I blinked at him. "Why are you doing all this for me?" He paused. "Because I know how it ends when no one fights back. And because..." He stopped, looking down at the papers. "Because you remind me that it doesn't have to end the same way every time." For the first time in months, I reached across the table and touched his hand. A quiet thank you. A quiet promise. Vanessa. At home, Vanessa sat alone. Sebastian was in the other room, pacing, plotting his next move. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. "I don't want to fight you. I want to protect us both. When you're ready to talk, I'll listen." Vanessa stared at the screen, torn. She thought of Caroline, of the fear in Olivia's eyes, of Sebastian's rage, and for the first time, she wondered if aligning with her mother might not mean weakness, but escape. Olivia. Before bed, I placed Rachel's card on my nightstand, Daniel's folder beneath it. Fear still pressed against my ribs, but alongside it now was something else. Focus. Sebastian thought I would always crumble. Vanessa thought I would always give in. But I was done being their foundation. It was time to become their reckoning. Olivia, it happened at the bank. I had gone in to finalize the protections Rachel set up. New account alerts, restricted transfers, my signature required for any changes. I was steady, calm, almost proud. Then the doors slammed open. Sebastian, Vanessa trailing behind him, pale, eyes darting. The entire lobby seemed to shrink as he strode toward me, voice carrying loud enough for every clerk and customer to hear. "You think you can embarrass me, Olivia?" he barked. "You think you can cut us off like some stranger? After everything we've done for you?" Heads turned. A woman clutching her purse gasped. A security guard stiffened. I stood taller. My hands didn't tremble. "Not this time." "You've done nothing for me, Sebastian," I said clearly, so every ear could hear. "You've only taken." His face reddened, fury twisting his mouth. "Careful, old woman. You wouldn't want Caroline to see you like this. Bitter. Selfish." That name, my granddaughter's name, was his mistake. Because across the lobby, someone was recording. A young man with his phone raised, capturing every word. Vanessa froze. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room. For years, she had controlled the narrative, painting her mother as fragile, pliable, generous to a fault. But here, in the bright light of the bank, Sebastian's mask cracked. His threats weren't private anymore, and for the first time, she wasn't sure whose side people would believe. Her gaze drifted to Olivia, chin high, voice firm, dignity unshaken, and something inside Vanessa whispered, "Maybe she isn't the weak one." Maybe I am. Daniel, by the time I arrived, security had already stepped in. Sebastian was being ushered out, still cursing, his voice echoing down the marble hall. Olivia stood in the center of it all, shaken but unbroken. Customers whispered, phones buzzed. The scene had been captured, spread, witnessed. I touched her arm gently. "Do you realize what just happened?" She blinked at me, still catching her breath. "What?" "You got what we needed. Evidence. Not just on paper, but on record. His threats in public, witnesses, video." For the first time, she looked at me not with fear, but with the beginnings of something fiercer. Hope. Olivia, that evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Rachel, Daniel, and a file that finally felt heavy enough to matter. Bank statements, threatening voicemails, and now video footage, witnesses, a public record of Sebastian's rage. Rachel leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "With this, Olivia, we don't just defend, we go on offense. We file for harassment, coercion, even protective orders that carry teeth." I thought of Vanessa, the way her face had crumpled in that lobby, caught between worlds. The tide was turning, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving my daughter's chaos. I was leading the charge against it. Olivia. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and coffee. My palms were damp, but I held my head high. For years I had whispered my pain in kitchens, in bedrooms, in banks where no one was listening. But today, everyone would hear. Sebastian sat at the defense table, jaw clenched, suit too tight around his thick neck. Vanessa was beside him, her eyes downcast, her fingers twisting nervously. Across from them sat Rachel, calm and sharp, her stack of files precise. Daniel gave me a small nod of encouragement. The judge entered. The room rose. My heart hammered. It was time. The case, Rachel began with quiet confidence, laying out years of transactions, loans that became gifts, debts never repaid, coercion disguised as family duty. Then she brought out the recordings, Sebastian's voicemails, his threats, the cruel words spoken in my own living room. Finally, the video from the bank lobby. On screen, Sebastian's voice rang out, ugly and raw. "You think you can embarrass me, Olivia? You think you can cut us off after everything we've done for you?" The courtroom stirred. Gasps, murmurs. Rachel let the silence stretch before she spoke again. "This, Your Honor, is not the voice of a caring son-in-law. This is the voice of coercion, intimidation, theft dressed as family obligation." Vanessa, when her turn came to testify, Vanessa's hands trembled. The prosecutor pressed gently. "Mrs. Carter, did your husband ever instruct you to pressure your mother into signing documents she did not understand?" Her lips parted. She glanced at Sebastian. His glare was sharp, a blade poised at her throat. Then her eyes drifted to me. I did not beg. I did not plead. I simply held her gaze, steady and calm. Something inside her cracked. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, firmer, "Yes, he made me do it. He said if I didn't, we'd lose everything." The courtroom erupted. Sebastian slammed his hand on the table, shouting, "Liar!" Security moved in. The judge barked for order, but the truth was already out. Sebastian, by the time he took the stand, his mask was gone. He sneered, snapped at Rachel, mocked the judge, contradicted himself. Every word sealed his fate. When Rachel calmly produced evidence of his hidden debts, his gambling accounts, his forged signatures, the room turned cold. Sebastian wasn't a man fighting for family. He was a predator, cornered and desperate. Olivia, when the verdict was read, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I simply closed my eyes and let the weight roll off my shoulders, guilty of fraud, guilty of coercion, guilty of attempted financial exploitation of an elder. Sebastian was led away in cuffs, his curses echoing down the hall. Vanessa sat frozen, tears streaming silently. She wasn't free of guilt. Not yet. But something about her posture told me the truth. She was no longer under his spell. Caroline's future, at least, could still be saved. Epilogue that night. Daniel and Rachel joined me at home. The house was quiet, Peter's old chair still by the window. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. "I don't know what's next," I admitted. "But I know it will be mine," Rachel smiled. "That's all that matters." Daniel lifted a glass of water and a toast. "To Olivia Anderson, the woman who finally said no. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to laugh. Because they were right. I wasn't just a victim. I wasn't just a mother, or a widow, or a woman who gave until there was nothing left. I was Olivia, and I had finally remembered who I really was.